The cold never really left the command room. Out there, beyond the thick viewport, space stretched empty and black, dotted with distant stars that didn't twinkle, they just stared. Like eyes. Inside the ship, the air hummed with a low, constant buzz, the kind that gets into your bones after too long. The lights were dim, not for mood, but because bright light made the screens harder to read. And right now, every screen mattered. The commander sat perfectly still. Not because he was calm, he wasn't. His hands rested lightly on the armrests of his chair, but his knuckles were white. You could see it if you looked close. His uniform, a smooth gray fabric that felt like stone, didn't wrinkle, didn't breathe, didn't sweat, but he did. A thin line of sweat traced his temple, ignored. He didn't wipe it away. Wiping meant showing weakness. And weakness got you killed out here. He'd been waiting for this moment for years. Training, planning, counting down the days. But now that it was here, his stomach felt like he'd swallowed ice. He kept staring at the main display, a massive, curved screen showing a tiny blue dot hanging in the black. Earth. Home to 8 billion messy, noisy, stubborn humans. His target, a soft chime sounded, not loud, just enough to make the officers around him tense up. One young guy new to the bridge still had that first mission. Jitters jumped slightly in his seat. The commander didn't turn. He didn't need to. He felt the shift in the room. The air got heavier, like before a storm. Then it came. Not a voice. Not a message on a screen. It burned straight into his mind, sharp and cold as a scalpel. Order. Assault Earth. Objective. Total subjugation. Authorization. High conclave. No explanation. No why. No room for questions. Just the order. Clean. Final. Like a door slamming shut. He closed his eyes for half a second. Just half. Long enough to see his daughter's face, in his head. She'd been playing near the crystal gardens back home that morning, laughing as she chased the light-refracting bugs. "Papa, look how they sparkle." He'd ruffled her hair, kissed her forehead, told her he'd be back before the twin moons rose. He hadn't said where he was going. Kids shouldn't carry that weight. Now, that memory felt like a stone in his chest. He opened his eyes. The blue dot on the screen seemed to pulse. Earth. They called it primitive. Back home, in the briefing rooms, they'd shown videos humans fighting each other with old guns, shouting on broken screens, wasting time on things that didn't matter. They're weak, the generals had said. Disorganized. Easy to break. The preventative remand. The breast. But he'd spent nights studying the human feeds. Not the war stuff. The other things. He'd watched a woman in a dusty village sing to her baby as she worked the fields, her voice cracking but warm. He'd seen a group of teenagers in a city, covered in bright colors, dancing on a street corner to music that had no rhythm he understood but made them happy. He'd seen an old man sit alone on a park bench, feeding birds, just watching them fly. That's what stuck with him. Not the wars, not the noise. The moments. The quiet things humans did when they thought no one was looking. The way they held on to small joys, like they were gold. Why? He'd asked his superior once. Why Earth? What do we gain? The answer had been flat. They're in the way. The conclave has spoken. That is all. No why. Just like the order burning in his head now. He took a slow breath. The air tasted sterile, like metal and fear. Around him, the crew moved with quiet efficiency. No shouting. No panic. Just the soft tap of fingers on controls, the low murmur of status reports. Gravitic drives at 98%. Weapons array online. All squadrons report ready. Each word was a nail in the coffin. He glanced at the fleet display. A sea of tiny icons, 1,842 warships, all waiting for his word. His word, not the conclave's. His. That's what they never told you in training. The weight wasn't in the order. It was in the silence after you gave it. One officer, a veteran with lines etched deep around his eyes, leaned close. His voice was barely a whisper, meant only for the commander. "They've got nothing out there, sir. Just some old satellites, a few space stations, no real weapons. We'll be done before sunset." The commander nodded. "It'll be quick," the officer added, like he was trying to convince himself. "Clean. Clean." That word again. Like wiping dust off a shelf. But Earth wasn't dust. It was alive, breathing, full of people who woke up that morning thinking they'd go to work, hug their kids, maybe watch the sunset. People who didn't know a fleet of ships was hanging in the dark, ready to end their world. He thought about that old man on the park bench. What if he was still there right now, sipping tea, watching the birds, oblivious? "Sir?" The officer's voice was tight now. "Awaiting your command." The commander's gaze snapped back to the blue dot. So small, so fragile looking, like a soap bubble floating in the void. One wrong move, and pop. Gone. He remembered something else from the human feeds. A video of a child building a sandcastle on a beach. The kid worked so hard digging moats, shaping towers, placing shells just right. Then a wave came. Just one wave. And the castle washed away. The child stared at the empty sand for a long moment. Then, they started building again. Humans didn't stop. Not ever. That's when the doubt hit him, sharp and sudden. What if we're wrong? The thought wasn't loud. It was a whisper in the back of his mind. What if they're not weak? What if they're just different? He shook it off. Stupid. Dangerous. The conclave didn't make mistakes. They'd studied Earth for decades. They knew what they were doing. Humans were fractured, divided. They'd tear themselves apart long before an enemy showed up. That's what the reports said. That's what he'd been told. But deep down, in that quiet place, he never let anyone see. He wasn't sure. He looked at his hand. Still resting on the armrest. Still white-knuckled. He forced his fingers to relax. One by one. It felt like lifting weights. "Final check," he said, his voice steady. Surprised himself. "All systems green, sir. Fleet synchronized. Weapons primed." No one said, "Ready to destroy them." They didn't need to. Everyone knew. He leaned forward. The blue dot filled his vision. He thought of his daughter's laugh. The sandcastle kid. The old man on the bench. This is duty, he told himself. This is why we serve. To protect our own. To follow the path laid out for us. He raised his hand. Just a few inches. That's all it took. The signal to begin. The room held its breath. His finger hovered over the command pad. Cold. Smooth. Just press it, he thought. One tap. End it. But his hand wouldn't move. Why? Because they're like us, a voice whispered inside him. They love. They hope. They build sandcastles. He crushed the thought. No. They're the target. That's all. He pressed his thumb down. The command pad lit up green. All ships, he said, his voice cutting through the silence like glass. Execute Order Sigma. Now. A beat of silence. Then, order received. Executing. Across the fleet, lights flared. Engines roared to life. Silent in the vacuum, but shaking the ship beneath his feet. On the main screen, the sea of warship icons began moving. A slow, unstoppable tide rolling toward that tiny blue dot. The young officer let out a shaky breath. The commander didn't answer. He just stared at Earth. It looked the same. Still blue. Still spinning. Still there. But it wasn't. Not really. The moment he gave that order, Earth stopped being a home. It became a target. A problem to solve. A thing to break. He thought of the sandcastle. How the wave came. How the kid just kept building. Set course, he said, his voice hollow. Maximum speed. Course set, sir. The ship surged forward. Stars blurred. Earth grew larger on the screen. He didn't look away. Even when his vision blurred. Even when the ice in his stomach melted into something hot and heavy. This is how it starts, he realized. Not with a bang. With a whisper. With a man in a chair. Pressing a button because he was told to. He thought of his daughter again. Papa, look how they sparkle. Would she understand one day? When she was older? When she learned what her father did out here in the dark? Would she still want him to come home? He closed his eyes. Just for a second. When he opened them, Earth filled the screen. And getting closer. The alarms weren't blaring anymore. They died hours ago, same as the lights in most of the city. Outside the cracked window, the sky wasn't sky anymore, it was wrong. Streaked with angry red and orange, like a sunset dipped in fire, but it was the middle of the night. The air tasted stale, thick with dust, and something sharp, like burnt metal. Down in the bunker, the air hummed with a different kind of panic. Not shouting, not crying, just the low, constant buzz of people trying not to scream. Fingers flew over cracked screens. Voices came out flat and tight over the comms, like they were holding their breath. Satellite grid, gone. Lunar station, silent. 3 ships down near the moon. Repeat. 3 ships gone. Each word felt like a hammer hitting the same nail. Deeper. Deeper. Someone had left a coffee cup on a console. It sat there, cold now, a ring of brown staining the plastic edge. A kid couldn't have been older than 19. With eyes too wide for his face kept glancing at it, like it might tell him what to do. His hands shook as he typed. He'd been here less than a month, fresh out of training. Probably thought this job meant watching stars, not watching the world end. Up on the main screen, the mess unfolded in silence. No sound in space, they said. Just slow-motion chaos. Little white dots, human ships darting like scared birds. Then bigger, darker shapes swallowing them whole. One ship, the Armstrong, hung back, holding its ground. A voice crackled over the speakers, strained but steady. They're everywhere. Shields failing, repeat. Shields failing. Tell my... And then static. Like someone unplugged the world. The room went dead quiet. Even the hum seemed to pause. The kid with the coffee cup dropped his pen. It rolled off the desk, hit the floor, and the click echoed like a gunshot. Someone else let out a shaky breath, like they'd forgotten to breathe for minutes. Outside, the real noise started. Not explosions, those were too far away to hear down here, but the deep, groaning thump of something massive hitting the earth. Buildings, shaking. Glass shattering blocks away. The bunker lights flickered once, twice, then stayed dim. Emergency lights kicked in, painting everything red. Like being underwater. Like being inside a wound. A woman in a stained lab coat sat slumped against a wall, knees pulled to her chest. She wasn't crying, just staring at her hands, covered in grease, and something darker. Her voice was a whisper, but everyone heard it. My sister's out there, in the city with the tall towers. No one answered. What could you say? Then the screen showed it. The dropships. Dozens of them, black and jagged, peeling off from the main fleet like sharks splitting from a school, heading straight down, toward the cities, toward the people. Can we stop them?" the kid asked, his voice cracked. An older man, face carved with lines from too many sleepless nights, shook his head without looking up. "We had satellites, lasers, missiles, all gone before we even knew they were here." He tapped a screen showing a map. Red dots bloomed like bloodstains over familiar places. They knew where to hit. Knew everything. The kid swallowed hard. "So, what do we do?" "Wait," the man said, and the word felt heavy as stone. "And hope someone up there remembered how to fight dirty. Up there, where the Armstrong had been, where Admiral Vance had been." Back on the screen, one of the dropships glowed white-hot as it tore through the atmosphere. It looked small from this far out. Harmless. Almost. Like a shooting star. But everyone in that room knew what it carried. Not rocks. Not fire. People. People with orders. People who didn't see cities. They saw targets. A young woman at a console suddenly gasped. "The Armstrong signal, it's back. Weak, but it's there." Hope flared, quick and bright. Like striking a match in a dark room. Heads snapped up. Shoulders straightened. The kid with the coffee cup leaned forward so fast his chair squeaked. Then the signal died again. The match went out. The room sagged. Shoulders dropped. The woman by the wall buried her face in her hands. The older man rubbed his eyes like he was trying to erase what he'd seen. But the kid? He didn't look away from the screen. His hands stopped shaking. He grabbed the coffee cup, took a long, bitter sip, and set it down hard. "They're not gone," he said, voice suddenly sure. No one argued. Maybe because they wanted to believe it. Maybe because hope, even a stupid, fragile one, was all they had left. Outside, another thump shook the bunker. Dust rained from the ceiling. The red lights flickered again. Someone coughed. Someone else started humming a quiet, tuneless sound, like a lullaby for the end of the world. The screens showed the dropships getting closer. Clearer. You could see the shape of them now. Ugly. Purpose-built for breaking things. One was heading straight for the city with the tall towers. The sisters' city. The woman by the wall stood up slowly, wiped her hands on her lab coat, walked over to the kid's console. "Show me the feed," she said. Her voice wasn't steady, but it wasn't broken either. He pulled it up. A shaky camera view from a drone, high above the city. Streets empty. Buildings dark. Then a shadow falling over the rooftops. The dropship. Huge. Silent. Blocking out the stars. The woman didn't look away. "How long?" she asked. "Minutes," the kid said. "Maybe less." She nodded. Like she'd just been told the train was coming. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." Then she did something no one expected. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, battered photo. Showed it to the kid. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, grinning in a sunflower field. "That's her," she said. "My niece. She lives there." She tapped the screen, right where the dropship's shadow fell. "She doesn't know what's coming. She's probably in bed, thinking about school tomorrow." The kid looked at the photo. At the city on the screen. Then he looked around the room at the tired faces, the red lights, the dust in the air. "We can't just watch," he said, louder this time. "There's gotta be something." The older man finally looked up. His eyes were red, but sharp. "There is," he said quietly. "We remember. We see them. Not targets. Not numbers. People." He pointed at the photo. "That girl. The sister. The old man who waters his plants every morning on the balcony. The kid who feeds pigeons in the square. We remember all of them. Because if we forget who we're fighting for, we've already lost." A beat of silence. Then the woman by the wall nodded. The humming stopped. The kid straightened his back. Even the air felt different, less heavy. like they'd just taken a real breath for the first time in hours. On the main screen, the dropship lowered itself over the city. Hatches opened. Tiny figures began to descend. The kid's fingers flew over his keyboard, not waiting for orders, not waiting for permission. He pulled up every camera feed he could find, traffic cams, security cams, even a kid's toy drone still buzzing near a park. He patched them together on a side screen, showed the empty streets, the dark windows, the lone streetlight still flickering on a corner. "Look at it," he said, voice raw. "Just look." And they did. They saw the city not as a target, but as a home. A place where people laughed over coffee, argued about sports, kissed goodbye in the rain. A place where a little girl dreamed about sunflowers. One by one, others joined him, pulling up feeds, finding the quiet moments, the humanity. The older man watched them, a flicker of something like pride in his eyes. "That's how we fight back," he murmured, "by refusing to see what they want us to see." Then a new signal, faint but strong. Not from a ship, from below, from the ocean. The kid's eyes widened. That's Project AEGS. But it's not supposed to." The older man was already moving. "Patch it through! Now!" The main screen flickered. The dropship vanished, replaced by a dark, grainy image deep ocean. Strange shapes rising from the seabed. Not weapons. Not ships. Something else. Something alive. The woman by the wall grabbed the kid's shoulder. Her voice was barely a breath. "What is that?" He stared at the data, scrolling beside the image. His hands weren't shaking anymore. They were steady. And, in birds, understapy, understapy, enderstapy, enderstapy, understapy, enderstapy, 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 enderstapy. "Certain. It's the ocean," he said, wonder in his voice. "It's fighting back." Outside, the deep thumping stopped. The red lights steadied. And for the first time since the sky turned red, someone in that room smiled. The ocean didn't roar. It sang. Down on the shore, old fishermen felt it first in their bones. Not through their ears, though the sound was there, low and deep like a cello played underwater, but in the soles of their feet, in the salt-crusted wood of their docks. They'd spent lifetimes reading the sea's moods. The angry chop of a storm, the lazy sigh of high tide, the nervous shiver before a squid run. But this was different. The water wasn't moving. It was vibrating, like the whole Pacific had become one giant tuning fork, struck by an invisible hand. One man, his hands knotted from 50 years of hauling nets, dropped to his knees right there on the wet sand, pressed his palms flat against the ground, closed his eyes. "It's in the earth too," he whispered. Not to anyone, just to the sea. His grandson, maybe 10 years old, crouched beside him, small fingers digging into the sand. "Papa, what's wrong with the water?" The old man didn't answer. Couldn't, because the water was wrong. Not rough, not calm, alive, like it had a heartbeat. And that heartbeat was getting louder. Up in the bunker, the screens flickered again. Not the shaky drone feeds of dropships anymore. This was deeper, darker, grainy footage from a camera bolted to the ocean floor miles down, where sunlight never reached. At first, just blackness. Then, shapes, rising from the seabed like ghosts. Not ships, not machines. Mountains. But mountains that moved. Smooth, dark forms. Sleek as whalebacks, peeling away from the ocean floor. 1, then 10, then hundreds, all humming with that same low, steady note. The kid at the console, still clutching the photo of the sunflower girl, leaned so close his nose almost touched the screen. "They're waking up," he breathed. His voice cracked, but not with fear, with wonder. The older man beside him squinted. "Aegis. They built it in the ocean. Not under it. As it." He tapped the screen where the shapes moved. "Seamounts. They made the mountains themselves into weapons." "But how?" the kid asked. "They're just rocks." "Not rocks," the older man said, a slow smile spreading under his tired eyes. "They're listening." On the beach, the vibration grew stronger. The little boy dropped his bucket. Sand spilled. He didn't notice. He was staring at the water, where the waves usually rolled in smooth and foamy. Now they shivered. Not breaking, not crashing, pulsing, like the ocean was breathing in slow, deep sighs. His grandfather stood up slowly, pulling the boy close. "Look," he said, pointing not at the water, but up. The sky. The alien dropships, those ugly, jagged shadows blotting out the stars, were wobbling, not flying, shaking, as if caught in an invisible earthquake. One ship, low over the city with the tall towers, suddenly lurched sideways. Its engines flared erratically blue, then white, then a sickly green before sputtering out. It didn't explode, didn't crash. It just folded, like paper in a child's hand, crumpling inward, silent and smooth, until it was no bigger than a pebble. Then it vanished. Not into smoke, into nothing. A gasp went through the crowd, gathering on the shore. People had crept out of basements, out of closets, drawn by the strange singing of the sea. A woman held a baby tight against her chest, rocking back and forth. "Shh, shh," she whispered, but it wasn't the baby crying. It was her. Tears cut clean tracks through the dust on her face. "It's okay," she kept saying, though she didn't know if she meant it for the baby, or for herself, or for the whole broken world. "It's okay now." Back in the bunker, the screens lit up with frantic energy. Not red, danger signals anymore. Green. Waves of green data scrolling too fast to read. The woman in the stained lab coat, whose sister was in the city with the tall towers, pressed her ear to a headset, eyes wide. "They're talking to each other," she blurted out. "The ocean floor. All those things. They're singing the same note, over and over. And the alien ships, they're shaking to it." The kid stared at the data. Numbers he didn't understand. But the pattern, he saw it. Like a heartbeat. Thump, thump. Thump, thump. It's not hurting them, he realized suddenly. It's matching them. He pointed at a graph. "See? The ships hum at one frequency. The ocean hums back at the exact same one. But louder." The older man nodded, his voice thick. "Resonance. Like when you push a swing at just the right time. It goes higher. Higher. Until..." He didn't finish. Didn't need to. On the main screen, another dropship began to shudder. Not violently. Gently. Like a leaf trembling in the wind. Then, slowly, impossibly, it started to glow. From the inside out. Not fire. Light. Pure, cool, blue light, pulsing in time with the ocean's song. For a few seconds, it hung there. Beautiful, a jewel in the dark sky. Then, like a candle snuffed out, the light vanished. The ship didn't fall. It just wasn't there anymore. Silence in the bunker, not the heavy silence of fear, the light, breathless silence of seeing magic. The kid looked around at the faces in the red emergency light. The woman by the wall wasn't hunched anymore. She stood tall, one hand resting on the console like she was touching the ocean itself. The young officer who'd dropped his pen hours ago had it back in his hand, scribbling notes on a scrap of paper. Not orders, just thoughts. Even the coffee cup sat upright now, no longer trembling. "Who did this?" someone whispered. The older man shook his head, watching the screens show more ships dissolving into blue light. Not one person, not one country. All of us. Every scientist who studied the deep. Every engineer who dreamed big. Every kid who asked, "What if the ocean could fight back?" He looked at the kid holding the sunflower photo. And we hid it where they'd never look in the thing they thought was just water. Out on the shore, the singing changed. Softened. The vibration in the sand became a gentle thrum, like a lullaby. The little boy tugged his grandfather's sleeve. "Papa? The water's happy now." The old man smiled, tears cutting through the salt on his cheeks. "Yeah, Mijo. It is." He pointed. Where the dropships had been, the sky was clearing. Stars blinked back into view. One bright star, Venus, maybe shone right where the last ship had vanished. A woman nearby dropped to her knees in the wet sand. Not praying, just feeling. She plunged her hands into the cool water, laughing through her tears. "It's warm," she called out, her voice shaking with joy. "The ocean's warm." And it was. Not hot, not burning, just alive. Like it had a pulse. Like it was breathing with them. People started moving, not running, walking, slowly, carefully, as if afraid the moment might break. They waded into the shallows, not to escape, but to touch, to feel the hum in their ankles, their knees, their chests. A man held his toddler up high, pointing at the stars. "Look, corazón," he murmured. "Look what the sea did for us." In the bunker, the screens showed the last of the alien fleet. Not attacking, not retreating, just floating, drifting, like leaves on a still pond. The ocean's song wrapped around them, gentle but unbreakable. One by one, the ships began to glow. Blue, soft, peaceful. Not the harsh light of weapons, but the quiet light of something, returning. The kid at the console finally let himself cry. Quiet tears. No sobs. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, smearing grease across his cheek. "They didn't win because they were stronger," he said, his voice raw but clear. The older man put a hand on his shoulder. Not heavy, just there, solid, real. "To the ocean," he said softly. "To the people who built it. To the little girl in the sunflowers." He looked around the room at the tired, hopeful faces. To us. On the main screen, the last alien ship glowed blue, then faded. Gone. Not with a bang. With a sigh. The ocean stopped singing. But the hum stayed. In the sand. In the water. In the chests of everyone who stood on the shore, hands clasped, heads tilted back, watching the stars come home. The woman with the baby pressed her cheek to her child's head. "Hear that?" she whispered. "That's the sound of us, still being here." And it was. Not a victory cry. Just the quiet, steady pulse of a world that refused to break. The silence hit first. Not the quiet of empty streets that came later, but the sudden stop of noise. 1 second, the sky was screaming with alien ships tearing through the atmosphere. The next, nothing. Just the wind. Gentle. Like it had forgotten how to be rough. People stumbled out of doorways, out of subway vents, out of the cracks in the world where they'd hidden. They didn't run. They listened. To the wind. To their own shaky breaths. To the soft plink of broken glass hitting pavement. A man in a flour-dusted apron stood frozen in the middle of the street. He'd been running when the sky lit up, carrying a loaf of still warm bread to his neighbor's apartment. Now the bread lay in the gutter, half crushed, steam rising in the cool air. He didn't move to pick it up, just stared up, squinting against the sun. Where the ships had been. Only blue. Real blue, not the angry red of before. He took one step, Then another. Kicked a piece of debris, a smooth, black shard, warm to the touch. He didn't know what it was. Didn't care. He bent down, picked up the bread, and kept walking toward the neighbor's door. Because that's what you do. You finish what you started. Down the block, a nurse sat on the curb, her back against a lamppost. Her scrubs were torn at the knee, but she wasn't bleeding. Just tired. So tired. She'd spent hours in the hospital basement, holding a flashlight for the doctor, passing bandages, whispering, "Almost done. Almost done," to a kid with a gash on his forehead. Now the kid was gone, taken home by his mom, and the nurse just sat. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She pressed them flat against the pavement, feeling the cool concrete seep through her palms. Solid, she thought. The ground still here. A little girl, maybe 6, appeared beside her. No shoes. One sock, hanging off her ankle. She held out a dented water bottle, half full. "My mom said to share," she said, voice small but steady. The nurse took it. Drank. Water tasted like dust and plastic, but she didn't spit it out. "Thank you," she whispered. The girl nodded. Like this was normal. Like sharing water with strangers on broken streets was just Tuesday. Then she ran off, calling for her brother. The nurse watched her go. The shaking in her hands slowed. She stood up, walked back toward the hospital. There'd be more to do. In the park, where the grass used to be green, now lay a field of ash. Not from fire, from the ships. As they'd changed, they'd left behind this fine gray powder, like crushed stars. An old man knelt there, scooping it into his hands. He'd been feeding pigeons here every morning for 30 years. Today, no pigeons. Just ash. He rubbed it between his fingers. It felt soft, like baby powder. He brought it to his nose. Smelled nothing. Just clean air. Funny, he thought. The sky tried to kill us, and all it left was dust. He stood up, ash clinging to his palms. Walked over to a sapling, just a thin green shoot, pushing through the rubble. He sprinkled the ash gently around its base. "Grow strong," he murmured. Not a prayer, just a wish. A teenager with a skateboard under his arm stopped beside him. "You think it'll work?" he asked, nodding at the sapling. The old man shrugged. "Only one way to find out." The kid crouched, dug a small hole with his hands, and planted a sunflower seed he'd pulled from his pocket. "My grandma always said," he said, patting the dirt, "even broken ground can hold something good." They stood there a moment, two strangers, watching the tiny seed disappear into the ash. No words needed. Back in the bunker, the red lights were off. Real lights now bright, clean, humming with power. The kid who'd held the sunflower photo sat at his console, but he wasn't typing, just staring at the main screen. It showed the ocean. Calm. Dark. The humming had stopped. The seamounts, those hidden weapons, were gone back to sleep, sinking into the deep like whales returning to the dark. He'd expected cheers, fireworks, something loud. Instead, quiet. People moving slowly, checking screens, handing out bottles of water. The older man who'd explained resonance stood beside him, sipping cold coffee from a chipped mug. "Where'd they go?" the kid asked, voice hoarse. "The ships. The things." The older man shook his head. "Not gone. Changed. Like when you melt ice, it's still water. Just different." He pointed at the ocean feed. "They became part of the sea. Part of the song." The kid frowned. "But why didn't they fight back?" At the end, a small smile touched the older man's lips. "Maybe they were fighting, just not how we thought. Maybe they realized they were the ones who didn't belong." He tapped the screen where the last ship had faded. Sometimes surrender isn't losing. Sometimes it's seeing the truth. The kid thought of the baker with the bread, the nurse on the curb, the old man planting ash. The older man just nodded. Didn't say, "You're smart," or "Good job." Just put a hand on his shoulder. Heavy, real, like the ground. Outside, the city breathed again. Slowly, carefully. People emerged from buildings like moles blinking in the sun. Not running, walking. To the corner store with the broken window. To the bus stop where a woman sat knitting, as if she'd been there all morning. To the fire hydrant someone had turned on a thin arc of water catching the light, kids dancing through it, laughing. No one yelled at them. No one cared. A woman pushed a grocery cart piled high with bottled water and canned beans. She stopped beside a man, digging through rubble. "Need anything?" she asked. He shook his head, but she left 2 bottles anyway. "For later," she said, and kept walking. Down the street, someone had set up a folding table. On it, a thermos of tea, a stack of paper cups, a sign written in shaky marker, "For thirsty hearts." People stopped, poured tea, drank, smiled, didn't say much, didn't need to. The baker reached his neighbor's door, knocked. An elderly woman opened it, eyes wide. He held out the bread still warm, still half crushed. "Thought you might be hungry," he said. She took it, her hands trembling, and pulled him into a hug that smelled like lavender and yeast. When she let go, she pressed a jar of pickles into his hands. "For your trouble," she said. He laughed, a real, deep laugh that surprised them both. High above, the sky stayed clear. No ships, no smoke, just the slow drift of clouds, fat and white as sheep. On a rooftop, a man sat with his back against a chimney. He held a radio, a real one, with dials and crackling static. He'd been listening all morning, hoping for news. Now, the static cleared. A voice, tired but warm, came through. "This is Global Relief Channel. If you can hear this, you're not alone. Repeat, you are not alone. Check on your neighbor. Share what you have. We'll rebuild, one street at a time." The man turned the radio off. Didn't need to hear more. He looked down at the street, saw the baker walking home, pickles in hand. Saw the nurse helping an old man up the steps to his building. Saw the teenager and the old man standing by the sapling, watching it in the sun. He took a deep breath. The air smelled like wet earth, like rain, but no clouds, like hope you don't name out loud. He stood up, went inside, found a pot, filled it with water, placed it on the stove, lit the burner, watched the flame catch. Simple things, necessary things, the kind of things you do when the world ends, and then doesn't. Down in the bunker, the kid finally stood up from his console, walked over to the woman who'd held the baby photo. She was staring at her phone, no signal, but she kept checking anyway. "They're okay," he said quietly. Not a guess. A knowing. She looked up, eyes red but dry. Nodded. "I know." He pointed to the main screen, now showing live feeds from the streets. The baker. The nurse. The sapling. "Look," he said. "They're already doing it." Doing what? Being human. She watched the screen. Saw a little girl hand a cookie to a stranger. Saw a man fix a broken bike chain for someone he didn't know. Saw 2 people stop, look at each other, and just smile. No words, just the quiet understanding that they'd all woken up today. Together. The woman closed her eyes. When she opened them, she was crying. But it wasn't the sad kind. It was the kind that comes when you realize the thing you were most afraid to lose. It was never gone at all. Outside, the city kept breathing. Slow. Steady. Alive. Not with a roar. but with the sound of 1,000 small kindnesses, stitching the world back together, one quiet moment at a time. The sun rose slow that morning. Not the panicked, orange-red dawn of the day before, but a soft, honey-colored light creeping over the rooftops like it was afraid to wake anyone. In the streets, the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full. Full of the scrape of a broom on pavement, the clink of glass being swept into a bucket, the low murmur of voices checking on neighbors. People moved without rushing, like they'd forgotten how to be in a hurry. A woman knelt on her front step, scrubbing ash off the concrete with a rag and a bucket of soapy water. Her arms ached, but it felt good. Real. Every swipe of the rag was a promise. This is mine. This is ours. We're still here. A man passing by stopped, set down his toolbox, and handed her a fresh rag without a word. She nodded, dipped it in the bucket, kept scrubbing. No thanks needed. Just two people making the ground clean again. Down by the river, where the alien ships had changed. The water looked different. Not murky, not scared. Clear, sparkling, even. In the morning light, an old fisherman sat on the dock, his hands resting on the sun-warmed wood. He didn't have a rod, just his palms flat against the planks, feeling the gentle hum beneath his skin. The same hum that had saved them. Fainter now, like a lullaby, half remembered. A kid on a bike skidded to a stop beside him. 10 years old, maybe. Scuffed knees, hair sticking up in every direction. Did it really talk? He asked, pointing at the water. The old man didn't look up. Not with words. How then? He tapped his chest. Here. Like your heart knows the beat of a song, even if you don't know the words. He dipped his fingers in the river, held them up. Water dripped, catching the sun like liquid glass. It didn't fight for us. It fought with us. Because we finally listened. The kid squinted at the water, then at his own muddy sneakers. So, it's our friend now? The old man smiled, a slow crinkling around his eyes. Friend? Maybe. More like family you didn't know you had. He patted the dock. Sit. Feel it. The kid did. And for a long moment, two strangers sat side by side, hands on warm wood, listening to the quiet song of the world still turning. In the bunker, the screens were dark now. Most of the crew had gone home. Only a few stayed behind, watching, waiting, just in case. The kid who'd tracked the ocean's song sat at his console, but his fingers weren't flying over keys. He was drawing. On a scrap of paper, a rough sketch of a sunflower. Under it, he wrote, "For the girl in the photo." He didn't know her name. Didn't need to. The older man, the one who'd explained resonance, stood behind him, sipping cold tea from a chipped mug. What now? The kid asked, not looking up. Now? The older man gestured at the quiet room. We learn. We remember why we built it. Not to hurt. To protect. He tapped the blank screen where the ocean feed had been. The real victory wasn't the ships fading. It was us choosing not to become them. The kid frowned. How? By not chasing them when they ran, the older man said softly. By not building bigger weapons. By understanding that the strongest shield isn't made of steel. It's made of care. He pointed out the bunker's lone window, where sunlight touched the city. Look out there. See it? The kid did. People sharing tools. Kids planting seeds in broken flower beds. A woman handing out slices of fruit from a basket. That's the shield. The older man said. Not down here. Out there. In every hand that reaches out, instead of clenches a fist. Outside. The city breathed its new rhythm. Not the frantic gasp of fear, but the steady inhale-exhale of healing. In a park where ash had covered everything, people gathered not for speeches, not for ceremonies, but to do. One man hammered a loose board on a playground swing. A woman strung fairy lights between trees, their soft glow already visible in the daylight. A group of teenagers filled sandbags, not for defense, but to rebuild the garden wall. No one told them what to do. No one had to. They just knew. Like the ocean had taught them. We are connected. When one part hurts, the whole body moves to heal it. A little girl stood by the sapling she'd planted with the old man the day before. She knelt, brushed dirt from its tiny leaves, and poured a little water from her sippy cup. "Grow strong," she whispered, just like he'd said. An older woman walking by stopped, watched for a moment, then knelt too. She pulled a seed packet from her pocket marigolds and pressed one into the girl's palm. "For later," she said, and walked on. The girl held the seed like it was gold. That afternoon, someone started it. Just a single note, hummed on a street corner. Then, another voice joined. Then, another. Not a song with words, just a low, steady hum. The same frequency the ocean had sung. People stopped, listened, felt it in their chests. Without thinking, they began to hum too, walking down the street, sweeping broken glass, holding a child's hand. The hum grew not loud, but deep, a vibration in the air, in the ground, in the blood. A baker, apron still dusted with flour, leaned out his doorway, hummed. A nurse pushing a grocery cart full of donated clothes hummed. The old fisherman on the dock hummed, his voice rough but sure. Even the kid on the bike joined in, humming as he rode, the sound carrying down the street like a heartbeat. No one knew who started it. No one cared. It wasn't about credit. It was about connection. A reminder. We felt this once. We feel it still. We are not alone. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in peach and lavender, people gathered in the biggest open space they could find, a wide, cracked parking lot near the river. Not for speeches. Not for flags. Just to be together. Some brought chairs. Some sat on blankets. Kids chased fireflies that hadn't been seen in the city for years. A man stood up, not a leader, just someone with a guitar. He strummed a few chords, simple and warm. Others pulled out harmonicas, tambourines, even spoons. They didn't play a song anyone knew. Just made music. Together. Off-key sometimes. Laughing when they messed up. But the hum underneath it all stayed steady. The ocean's song. Their song. A woman stood near the edge, holding a photo. Not of her sister she'd found her. Safe. That morning, but of the city as it was before. Tall towers, crowded streets, the messy, noisy hum of ordinary life. She looked at the photo, then at the people around her, laughing, sharing food, humming along to the music. Tears welled, but she wasn't sad. She was seeing it. Really seeing it. The thing worth protecting wasn't the buildings or the streets. It was this. The quiet magic of humans choosing each other. Again and again. She tucked the photo away, walked into the crowd, took a plate of food from a stranger, sat down on the grass, hummed. Later, under a sky full of stars, the kid from the bunker walked home, past the baker's shop lights on, fresh bread cooling in the window, past the park, fairy lights glowing, kids still playing, past the river, dark now, but humming softly. He stopped, took off his shoes, and waded into the shallows. Cool water swirled around his ankles. He closed his eyes, felt the vibration in his bones. He didn't pray. Didn't ask for anything. Just stood there. A small human in a vast, breathing world. And for the first time since the sky turned red, he didn't feel small. He felt part of something huge. Something kind. Back on the dock, the old fisherman watched him. Smiled to himself. Picked up his bucket. Not for fish. for water. He dipped it deep, carried it to the sapling by the riverbank, and poured it gently at the roots. The city slept that night not in fear, but in peace, not with sirens, but with the quiet hum of 1,000 dreams, of bread baking at dawn, of seeds pushing through ash, of hands reaching out in the dark. The shield wasn't a wall. It wasn't weapons. It was this: the sound of people choosing, every single day, to be human, together.